The quiet regular. Previous content remains the same up until, and it would only be the beginning of the longest night of his life. The leader of the armored group took 3 measured steps forward, his boots leaving scorch marks on the metal floor. You've been running for too long, Marcus. The Foundation wants what you took. The elderly human, Marcus, finally turned around on his barstool, and Araxi saw something change in his eyes. The weariness vanished, replaced by a hardness that seemed to drop the temperature in the room by several degrees. I didn't take anything, Marcus said quietly. I prevented them from taking something that was never theirs to begin with. His hand moved to his jacket pocket, and Araxi noticed for the first time a slight bulge there, about the size of a data crystal. The leader's helmet retracted, revealing a young face with a nasty scar running from temple to jaw. The Lazarus Protocol belongs to the Foundation. You're just a relic, old man. A leftover from wars everyone else has forgotten. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You really don't know what you're dealing with, do you? The Foundation sent you here to die. The other 2 armored figures spread out, their weapon systems humming to life. The few remaining patrons began quietly sliding toward the exits, all except the Relaxians, who seemed frozen in place. Last chance, Marcus, the leader said. Hand over the protocol, and we'll make it quick. Marcus stood up slowly, his movements still carrying that eerie precision. Araxi, he said, not taking his eyes off the armored figures, remember what your boss said about the bottle of Turan Isy? Araxi's antennae twitched. Yes, sir. Now would be a good time. Everything happened at once. As Araxi reached for the bottle, Marcus moved with impossible speed for someone his age. His hand came out of his pocket holding not a data crystal, but a small metallic sphere. He tossed it underhanded toward the leader, who instinctively caught it. Explosive, the leader sneered, looking at the sphere. Worse, Marcus said, and dropped to the floor. The sphere erupted in a burst of bluish-white light. The armored figure systems went haywire, their suits locking up as emergency protocols activated. The leader tried to speak, but his helmet had sealed shut, trapping him in his own armor. Marcus was already moving. He rolled behind the bar, grabbing the metal bar KZZK had given Araxi. Down, he shouted, and Araxi didn't hesitate to comply. The bar's security shutters began descending as Araxi slammed down the bottle of Turan Isy. Through the chaos, he heard Marcus mutter something that sounded like, 3, 2, 1. The back wall of the bar exploded inward, and through the breach stepped 3 more figures. But these weren't wearing the sleek armor of the Foundation. Their suits were older, bulkier, bearing battle scars and patch jobs that spoke of years of hard use. Each one had a stylized iron fist emblazoned on their shoulder plates. Took you long enough, Marcus called out. Had to make sure they weren't followed, one of the new arrivals responded, voice gravelly through external speakers. You got what we need. Marcus pulled a real data crystal from his boot. Right where they'd never look. Amateur hour at the Foundation these days. The leader of the Foundation team managed to partially unlock his helmet. You don't understand what you're preventing. The Lazarus Protocol could revolutionize everything. That's what we're afraid of, Marcus said. He turned to Araxi, who was still crouched behind the bar. Sorry about the mess, kid. Your boss was right about me, trouble follows wherever I go. But we try to pay for what we break. One of Marcus's companions tossed a heavy bag onto the bar. The distinct clink of high-denomination credit chips came from within. The Foundation will keep coming, the leader warned. Let them, Marcus replied. The Iron Men might be relics, but we're relics with a purpose. The protocol stays buried. He looked at Araxi again. You handled yourself well tonight. Not everyone keeps their cool when the shooting starts. If you ever decide tending bar isn't exciting enough, look us up. The 3 Iron Men secured the Foundation agents, efficiently disabling their armor's power systems and removing key components. As they worked, Marcus explained to Araxi, the Foundation thinks they can control everything, planets, people, even death itself. The Lazarus Protocol is their latest attempt. They'd tell you it's about saving lives, about cheating death. But you don't get to decide who lives and who dies without becoming something worse than death itself. Within minutes, it was over. The Foundation agents were neutralized, the bar was mostly intact aside from the 2 new holes in the walls, and Marcus's companions had disappeared as quickly as they'd arrived, taking the captured agents with them. Marcus lingered for a moment at the bar. Your boss was right about something else too, your apprenticeship ends tonight. You've seen things most bartenders never will. The Foundation might come asking questions. Up to you what you tell them. He placed another credit chip on the bar. But remember, sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones we keep to ourselves. With that, he was gone, leaving Araxi alone in the partially destroyed bar. When KZZK finally emerged from his office, his crystalline eyes widened at the scene. Still alive? He asked, mandibles clicking. Yes, boss. Furniture mostly intact. Mostly. KZZK surveyed the damage. Well, you survived an Iron Man incident. That's going on your certification. Pour yourself a drink, kid. You've earned it. He paused. Just, not the Turan Isy. We save that for special occasions. Araxi looked at the bottle, still sitting where he'd placed it when the shutters came down. What would have happened if I'd opened it? KZZK's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. That's a story for another night. Right now, we've got a bar to clean up. And tomorrow. He gestured at the walls. Tomorrow, we're getting stronger walls. As Araxi began cleaning up, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last he'd seen of Marcus, the Iron Men, or the Foundation. Something told him that tonight's events were just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would change not just his life, but possibly the fate of the entire galaxy. The data crystal that had caused all this trouble was now safely hidden away, but its secrets, and the war over who had the right to control life and death, were far from over. And somehow, Araxi knew he'd end up right in the middle of it all again. At least the tips would be good. The price of knowledge. 3 days after the incident with Marcus and the Foundation agents, Araxi discovered that surviving an Iron Man's visit was both a blessing and a curse. The blessing came in the form of instant respect from the station's rougher elements. Nobody wanted to start trouble with a bartender who'd faced down Foundation agents and lived. The curse manifested in the endless stream of questions from curious patrons and the growing sense that he was being watched. The repair drones had barely finished patching the walls when the first Foundation investigator arrived. She wasn't what Araxi expected, no armor, no weapons, just a civilian suit and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I'm Administrator Chen, she said, sliding onto Marcus's former seat. Just here to clear up a few details about the recent unpleasantness. Araxi's antennae twitched as he remembered Marcus's parting words about choosing what stories to tell. We had some rowdy customers. Boss already filed the incident report with station security. Chen's smile widened fractionally. Come now, Araxi. We both know it was more than that. The Foundation is prepared to be quite generous with those who help us understand the situation better. She placed a credit chip on the bar that would have covered 6 months of his salary. What would you like to drink? Araxi asked, ignoring the chip. Something dangerous flickered behind Chen's pleasant expression. You're newly certified, aren't you? It would be a shame if certain irregularities were found in your paperwork. The Foundation has considerable influence with the Intergalactic Beverage Service. Before Araxi could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. The Foundation's influence isn't what it used to be. Both Araxi and Chen turned to see one of the Relaxians who'd been present during the fight. The insectoid alien's chitin armor gleamed under the bar's lights as he approached, each step deliberate and measured. Captain VX Crix, Chen said, her smile becoming brittle. The Foundation wasn't aware you had interests in this sector. The Foundation isn't aware of many things, VX Crix clicked, his mandibles moving in what Araxi recognized as amusement. Like how many of us remember the colony wars? Or how many still owe debts to the Iron Men? Chen's hand moved slightly toward her jacket, but VX Crix's warriors had already surrounded her, their movements silent despite their armor. The Foundation's reach is long, she warned. But memory is longer, VX Crix responded. The bartender is under our protection. I suggest you take your credits and your threats elsewhere. The administrator stood slowly, smoothing her jacket. This isn't over. It never is, with your kind, VX Crix noted. As Chen left, he turned to Araxi. You should close early tonight. There are things you need to know. After the last customers were ushered out and the security shutters were down, VX Crix gathered his warriors around the bar. KZZK emerged from his office, carrying something wrapped in old cloth. You've drawn their attention now, VX Crix said to Araxi. The Foundation doesn't let go easily. They'll be back, with more subtle methods than threats or bribes. Why? Araxi asked. I don't know anything about their protocol or the Iron Men. KZZK unwrapped the cloth package, revealing an ancient-looking data pad. You know more than you think. Marcus wasn't just hiding here, he was watching, waiting. The Foundation's agents weren't the first to come looking for him, just the first to find him. The data pad flickered to life, displaying schematics that made Araxi's compound eyes hurt to look at. What is this? Proof, VX Crix clicked. Proof that the Lazarus Protocol isn't what the Foundation claims. They say it's about preserving life, about cheating death. The truth is darker. Much darker. As VX Crix explained, Araxi learned why Marcus and the Iron Men fought so hard to keep the protocol hidden. The schematics showed more than just a way to preserve life, they revealed a method to control it, to rewrite the very essence of consciousness itself. During the colony wars, VX Crix continued, the Foundation experimented with similar technology. They called it preserving their fallen soldiers. What they really did was trap them, turn them into weapons that couldn't die, couldn't rest, couldn't even remember who they used to be. KZZK's crystalline eyes clouded. The Iron Men were the ones who discovered the truth. They destroyed the research facilities, freed as many of the subjects as they could. The Foundation never forgave them for it. But that was decades ago, Araxi said. Why start again now? Because they found something in the void between galaxies, VX Crix clicked softly. Something old. Something that shouldn't be. And they think the Lazarus Protocol is the key to controlling it. A distant explosion rocked the station, making the glasses rattle. Emergency sirens began to wail. They're here, one of VX Crix's warriors announced, checking a wrist-mounted scanner. Foundation ships, dropping out of hyperspace. At least 3 cruiser-class vessels. KZZK cursed in his native tongue. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. They can't afford to be, VX Crix said. Whatever they found out there, it's made them desperate. Marcus knew this would happen. That's why he left something with you, bartender. Something you don't even know you have. Araxi's antennae went rigid as realization struck. Every night for a month, Marcus had sat at the same spot, drinking from the same glass. A glass that Araxi had washed and stored in the same place, following the same routine. He rushed to the storage shelf, pulling down what looked like an ordinary glass. Under the base, barely visible, was a hair-thin disk of crystalline material. The real Lazarus Protocol, VX Crix confirmed. What the Foundation has is a fake, a corrupted version Marcus let them steal. He knew they'd keep chasing him, giving him time to figure out who he could trust with the truth. Another explosion, closer this time. The station's artificial gravity hiccuped. We need to move, KZZK insisted. The Foundation will lock down every level soon. What about the bar? Araxi asked. His boss's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. Kid, I've rebuilt this place 6 times. It's not the bar they want, it's what you represent now. A loose end. Someone who knows too much. He's right, the ex-crick said. You have a choice to make, bartender. You can come with us, learn the full truth about what's out there in the void, help us stop the Foundation from awakening something that should stay sleeping. Or you can walk away, try to convince them you know nothing. Through the reinforced walls, Araxi could hear the sound of boarding craft docking with the station. The Foundation was coming in force, and they wouldn't be using administrators with fake smiles this time. He looked at the glass in his hands, thinking about Marcus's careful movements, his measured words, the way he'd trusted a simple bartender with something so important. The old human had seen something in him, something worth betting on. How long do we have? Araxi asked. Minutes, the ex-cricks replied. My ship is docked at the emergency airlock behind the kitchen. We've got a head start, but not much of one. KZZK reached under the bar and pulled out a familiar metal rod, the same one he'd given Araxi the night Marcus revealed himself. Take it, he said. Where you're going, you might need it. You're not coming. Someone has to stay and tell them you left days ago, heading in the wrong direction. KZZK's crystalline eyes sparkled with mischief. Besides, this place needs a real bartender, not some rookie who runs off to save the galaxy. The station shuddered again as Foundation forces began their systematic search. Time was running out. Make your choice, VX-Crix urged. But make it knowing that either way, your life as you knew it is over. The Foundation doesn't forget, and neither do the Iron Men. Araxi gripped the metal bar in one hand and the glass containing humanity's most dangerous secret in another. He thought about Marcus's words about the most interesting stories being the ones we keep to ourselves. Some stories, he realized, were meant to be lived. Lead the way, Captain, he said to VX-Crix. I think it's time I learned what's really out there in the void. As they rushed through the kitchen toward their escape route, alarms blaring and Foundation forces closing in, Araxi couldn't help but wonder if every Iron Man story started like this, with a choice, a secret, and a bartender who asked too many questions. He had a feeling he'd find out soon enough. The void beckons. The emergency airlock hissed open as Captain Zekathar's chitinous fingers danced across the control panel. Nixus clutched the metal bar and the precious glass as they raced through the maintenance tunnels of Station Delta 7. Behind them, the rhythmic thud of Foundation combat boots echoed through the corridors. Your first space chase. Zekathar clicked, his mandibles twitching with what might have been amusement. First everything today, Nixus replied, his bioluminescent spots pulsing with anxiety. The former bartender's jellyfish-like tendrils rippled as they ran, adapting to the station's shifting artificial gravity. A voice boomed through the station's emergency channels, this is Foundation Security Director Hawthorne. The station is under quarantine due to a Class 3 biohazard. All civilians are ordered to remain in their quarters. Anyone found in the corridors will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Biohazard? Nixus whispered. They're not even trying to hide anymore. The Foundation never does, when they're desperate. Zekathar's warrior cast armor gleamed as they rounded another corner. The thing they found out there in the void, it scared them enough to abandon subtlety. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Zekathar held up a clawed hand, signaling his warriors to stop. From the shadows emerged a figure Nixus didn't recognize, a human woman with cybernetic augmentations running along her temples and jaw. Sarah, Zekathar clicked. I was wondering when you'd show up. Had to make sure you were being followed by the right people, she replied, her cybernetic eyes scanning their surroundings. Marcus said you might need an exit strategy. Marcus knew this would happen? Nixus asked. Sarah's augmented smile was cold. Marcus knows everything. That's why the Foundation wants him dead. Speaking of which. She tapped her temple, and holographic schematics appeared in the air. They've got kill teams converging from 3 directions. Standard Foundation sweep pattern. How many? Zkathar asked. 30, maybe 40 operators. Plus their new toys. New toys? Sarah's expression darkened. Remember those soldiers they lost during the Centauri campaign? Turns out they weren't so lost after all. The Foundation's been experimenting. Nixus felt his chromatophores pale. The Lazarus Protocol. They've already used it. On volunteers, they claim. But dead men can't exactly withdraw consent. Sarah checked something on her wrist display. We've got about 3 minutes before they close the net. The good news is, I've got transport arranged. The bad news. An inhuman screech echoed through the corridors, making Nixus's entire body vibrate. It sounded like metal being torn apart, but underneath there was something else, something that might once have been human. That's the bad news, Sarah finished. Zkathar's warriors formed a defensive circle, their weapons humming to life. The glass, the captain said to Nixus. Is it secure? Nixus nodded, his tendrils wrapping protectively around the seemingly ordinary drinking vessel that contained humanity's most dangerous secret. Good. Because what's coming, what they've turned those poor bastards into, it's going to test everything Marcus taught you about staying alive. The screeching grew closer, accompanied by the sound of metal being shredded. Through a ventilation grate, Nixus caught a glimpse of what was hunting them. His bioluminescence flickered in horror. The thing had once been human, but the Foundation's version of the Lazarus Protocol had twisted it into something else. Metallic implants burst from its skin like chrome flowers, its movements jerky yet impossibly fast. Its eyes glowed with an inner light that spoke of consciousness trapped, twisted, but not quite extinguished. What did they do to them? Nixus whispered. They tried to make their own Iron Men, Sarah spat. Couldn't replicate what made Marcus and his kind special, so they went for quantity over quality. Turned their own dead into hunting dogs. How do we fight them? We don't, Zkathar clicked. We run. Sarah. She grinned, her cybernetics glowing brighter. Thought you'd never ask. She pressed a sequence on her wrist display, and suddenly the station's lighting shifted to emergency red. Alarms blared as security bulkheads began slamming down throughout the sector. The Foundation's twisted creations screeched in frustration as their pursuit was interrupted by meters of reinforced steel. Won't hold them long, Sarah warned. Those things can tear through bulkheads like paper. But it'll buy us time to reach the ship. They ran through the maze of corridors, Sarah's cybernetic systems interfacing with the station's security to clear their path while blocking their pursuers. Behind them, the sound of metal being torn apart grew steadily closer. What Marcus found, Nixus gasped as they ran, what the Foundation is really looking for, it's connected to these things, isn't it? Smart bartender, Sarah replied. The void between galaxies, it's not empty. There's something out there that's been watching us, waiting. The Foundation thinks they found a way to control it, but all they're doing is giving it a way in. They reached a maintenance airlock, and Nixus saw their escape vehicle, a sleek ship of obvious military design, but with modifications that spoke of years of unofficial use. The Iron Rose, Sarah said proudly. Fastest smuggler in 3 sectors, and the only ship that's ever outrun those things. The sound of tearing metal was getting closer. Zkathar's warriors took up defensive positions as Sarah began the docking sequence. The Foundation, Nixus said, something clicking in his mind. They're not just trying to control life and death. They're trying to build an army that can't die, can't disobey. But for what? War, Zkathar clicked grimly. Not against any enemy we know. They think something's coming, something from out there in the void. They want to be ready. But they're wrong, Sarah added, her cybernetics pulsing with urgency. They're not preparing for war. They're starting one. And those things they're creating? They're just the beginning. The airlock cycled open just as the first of the Foundation's twisted hunters burst through the final bulkhead. Nixus got his first clear look at what they were facing, and his entire body went cold. The creature's face was still recognizably human, frozen in an expression of agony. But its body was a nightmare of metal and flesh, pistons and servos working alongside muscle and bone. And in its eyes, those terrible, glowing eyes, Nixus saw awareness, trapped and screaming. Inside. Now. Sarah shouted, laying down covering fire with a weapon that seemed to distort the very air around its target. As they piled into the ship, Nixus looked back one last time at the station he'd called home. Through the viewports, he could see more Foundation ships arriving, their weapons charging. They'll destroy the whole station to keep their secret, he realized. No, Zkathar clicked. They'll destroy it to keep what's in that glass from getting away. What Marcus found, it's bigger than just the protocol. It's about what's really out there in the void, watching us, waiting for someone to open the door. The Iron Rose's engines roared to life as Sarah executed a combat launch that stripped paint from the airlock walls. Behind them, the Foundation's corrupted soldiers clawed at the ship's hull, their screams cutting off as they were thrown into space. As they accelerated away from the station, Nixus watched Delta 7 grow smaller in the viewport. Somewhere down there, KZZK was probably already rebuilding his bar, telling lies to Foundation investigators, keeping secrets that could reshape the galaxy. Where are we going? He asked. Sarah's augmented eyes glowed as she plotted their course. To find Marcus. He's gathered the other Iron Men, all of them. Something's starting, something big. And that glass you're holding? It's either going to save us all or doom us completely. The ship's jump drive spooled up, preparing to tear a hole in reality itself. As the stars began to blur, Nixus thought about how quickly life could change. Yesterday, he'd been a simple bartender. Today, he was running from the Foundation with a ship full of warriors, a cyber-augmented smuggler, and a secret that could start a war with something that lived in the darkness between galaxies. And somewhere out there, Marcus and his Iron Men were waiting, preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but all sentient life. At least he'd brought his own weapon, even if it was just a dented metal bar from a space station dive. Echoes of the void. The Iron Rose dropped out of hyperspace in a burst of quantum distortion, its hull creaking from the strain of their desperate escape. Telos watched the void through the ship's viewport, his crystalline form refracting the starlight in patterns that matched his unease. The glass containing humanity's most dangerous secret remained secure in his mineral-based grip. We're being followed, Krvex announced from his tactical station, his chitinous armor clicking as he studied the sensor readings. 3 Foundation pursuit craft. They're using some kind of new drive system, I've never seen signatures like these. Sarah's cybernetics pulsed as she pushed the Iron Rose's engines beyond their rated limits. They're using tech they found in the void. Marcus warned us they'd started adapting it. What exactly did they find out there? Telos asked, his crystalline surface catching the light of distant stars. The former bartender had spent the jump trying to process everything that had happened since Marcus walked into his bar, but each answer only led to more questions. Before anyone could respond, the ship's sensors screamed a warning. Space itself seemed to twist in front of them, and something emerged that defied description. It looked like a tear in reality, a window into somewhere that shouldn't exist. Speaking of the void, Sarah muttered, her augmented eyes widening. Everyone hold on to something. This is going to get weird. The tear in space expanded, revealing what looked like a station or installation of some kind, but its architecture was wrong, as if it had been designed by minds that didn't understand or care about the normal laws of physics. The Nexus, Krvex clicked softly. Marcus actually found it. Through the ship's comm system came a familiar voice, Sarah, you're right on schedule. Bringing you in now. Try not to look too long at the architecture, it takes some getting used to. The Iron Rose was caught in some kind of traction field, being drawn toward the impossible structure. Telos watched as reality seemed to fold around them, his crystalline senses detecting energies that shouldn't exist in normal space. The Foundation ships, Krvex reported, they're falling back. They won't follow us in here. Smart of them, Sarah said. Last time they tried, half their fleet went mad just looking at this place. The human mind isn't meant to process void architecture, not without preparation. The ship passed through some kind of barrier, and suddenly they were inside a vast docking bay that seemed to operate under its own rules of geometry. Other ships were already docked, vessels of various designs, all modified for combat and stealth. The Iron Fleet, Sarah explained, seeing Telos's confusion. Every Iron Man who's still alive, all in one place. Hasn't happened since the colony wars. As they disembarked, Telos saw Marcus waiting for them on the landing pad. The old Iron Man looked different here, more alert, more dangerous, as if being in this impossible place had awakened something in him. You made it, Marcus said, nodding at the glass in Telos's grip. And you brought our insurance policy. Good. We're going to need it. Need it for what? Telos asked, his crystalline form vibrating with tension. What is this place? What did the Foundation find out here? Marcus gestured for them to follow him through corridors that seemed to bend in impossible ways. This station, we call it the Nexus, it's not human technology. It's not anyone's technology, at least not anyone we've ever met. It exists in multiple places at once, spanning the void between galaxies. They entered what appeared to be a command center, where dozens of other humans, all bearing the distinctive presence Telos had learned to associate with Iron Men, were gathered around displays showing data that hurt to look at. The Foundation found something out here, Marcus continued. An echo, a signal from somewhere beyond the boundaries of known space. They thought they'd discovered the key to immortality, a way to preserve human consciousness indefinitely. What they actually found was a door, and something on the other side was waiting for them to open it. One of the displays showed footage from what appeared to be a Foundation research station. Telos watched in horror as human researchers, their bodies twisted by some kind of energy, transformed into things similar to what had chased them on Delta 7. The Lazarus Protocol, Marcus explained, wasn't their invention. It was given to them, fed to them piece by piece through that signal. They thought they were brilliant, making these revolutionary discoveries. They were being led by the nose, shown exactly what they wanted to see. By what? Telos asked, his crystalline structure emanating waves of unease. We call them the Void Architects, another Iron Man said, stepping forward. They built places like this Nexus, scattered them across the darkness between galaxies. They're patient, methodical, and they've been waiting for someone exactly like the Foundation, someone arrogant enough to think they could control the power of death itself. The Foundation's attempts to recreate Iron Men, Marcus added, their experiments with the protocol, they're playing right into the Architects' plans. Every twisted soldier they create, every consciousness they trap in those metal bodies, it's all strengthening the signal, widening the door. Krvex's mandibles clicked in agitation. And what's on the other side of that door? Something old, Marcus said grimly. Something that sees organic life as nothing but raw material to be reshaped. The Architects are their servants, their scouts, preparing galaxies for harvest. And humanity's arrogance is about to give them exactly what they need. Telos looked at the glass in his hand, the one Marcus had used every night at his bar. This contains the real protocol, doesn't it? The version that actually works. Marcus nodded. The original Iron Men, we weren't created by human science. We were an accident, a mutation. Something in our neural patterns made us resistant to the signal, let us keep our humanity even after death refused to take us. The Foundation's been trying to replicate that resistance, but all they've done is create perfect vessels for the Architects to use. So what's the plan? Sarah asked, her cybernetics glowing in the strange light of the Nexus. We're going to close the door, Marcus said simply. But first, we need to rescue everyone we can from the Foundation's experiments. There are thousands of trapped souls in those twisted bodies, and we're not leaving them to become puppets for something from the void. He turned to Telos, his eyes carrying the weight of centuries. Still glad you left that bar, bartender? Telos straightened his crystalline form, gripping the metal bar from his old workplace. Someone once told me the most interesting stories are the ones we keep to ourselves. I think this one needs to be told. Marcus smiled, the first real smile Telos had seen from him. Then let's make it a story worth telling. We've got souls to save, a foundation to stop, and something ancient to send back into the void where it belongs. Through the impossible windows of the Nexus, Telos could see the darkness between galaxies. Somewhere out there, the void architects were waiting, watching through their signal, preparing for a harvest that would reshape humanity into something unrecognizable. But they hadn't counted on the Iron Men. They hadn't counted on the strange family of misfits and warriors that had gathered in this impossible place. And they definitely hadn't counted on a bartender with a piece of metal in his hand and the real Lazarus protocol in his pocket. The void might be calling, but Telos was ready to answer with a story of his own. Last call. The void nexus shuddered as reality itself seemed to protest what was about to happen. Marcus stood at the command center, surrounded by displays showing Foundation fleets converging on their position. But it wasn't the ships that worried him, it was what they were bringing with them. Signal strength is increasing, Sarah reported, her cybernetics flickering with static. The Foundation isn't just sending ships, they're sending every twisted thing they've created with that corrupted protocol. Thousands of them. Telos watched the tactical displays, his crystalline form resonating with the strange energies that permeated the Nexus. They're not trying to hide anymore, are they? They can't afford to, Marcus replied. The Void Architects have shown them their endgame. The Foundation thinks if they deliver enough converted souls, they'll be spared what's coming. They're wrong. KR Vexa's warriors had taken up defensive positions throughout the impossible geometry of the station. How long? The Relaxian commander clicked. Hours, maybe less. Marcus turned to address the gathered Iron Men, dozens of ancient warriors who had cheated death itself. We all knew this day was coming. Ever since we first felt that signal trying to twist our minds, we knew something was out there, waiting. Today, we find out what. The real Lazarus protocol, still contained in the seemingly ordinary glass from Telos's bar, sat on a pedestal at the center of the command room. Around it, complex machinery that hurt to look at hummed with power drawn from the void itself. The plan is simple, Marcus continued. The Foundation's corrupted protocol opens the door for the architects. Our version, the true version, can seal it forever. But there's a cost. There always is, Sarah muttered. Every Iron Man, every soul that's been touched by the protocol, corrupted or pure, has to be on this side when we close the door. If we don't get all of them, the architects will still have a foothold in our reality. Telos's crystalline surface flickered with realization. You're going to sacrifice yourselves. Marcus smiled that tired smile that had first caught Telos's attention in the bar. We've lived too long anyway, bartender. Death's been trying to collect us for centuries. Time to pay the bill. Warning klaxons blared as the first wave of Foundation ships dropped out of hyperspace. With them came things that had once been human, twisted metal and flesh fused together by the corrupted protocol, their trapped souls screaming in frequencies that made Telos's crystal structure vibrate. Begin the evacuation, Marcus ordered. Anyone who isn't essential to the plan gets out now. Sarah, get the Iron Rose ready. Once we start this, there's no going back. But Sarah shook her head, her cybernetics pulsing defiantly. I'm staying. Someone needs to pilot this impossible station, and my systems are already interfaced with its architecture. They'll die, Telos said softly, looking at his friends. All of them. No, Marcus corrected. We'll be free. The protocol never gave us immortality, it trapped us between life and death. The Foundation's victims are suffering even worse. This ends today, one way or another. The Nexus's defenses engaged as the first wave of Foundation forces attacked. Through the impossible windows, Telos saw void energy crackling between stars, marking the approach of something vast and ancient. They're coming through, Sarah announced. The architects, they're using the Foundation's assault as cover to begin the harvest. Marcus turned to Telos, his eyes carrying centuries of weight. This is your last chance to leave, bartender. You've done more than enough already. Telos gripped his metal bar, the same one that had seen him through that first night when Marcus walked into his bar. I'm staying. Someone needs to tell this story. Then let's make it a good one. Marcus raised his voice to address everyone in the command center. Iron Men. One last time into the breach. Let's show these void-dwelling bastards why humanity's been giving them headaches for centuries. The battle that followed would be remembered in whispered legends across 1,000 worlds. The Foundation's fleet, led by their twisted protocol victims, crashed against the Nexus's impossible defenses. The Iron Men, those ancient warriors who had cheated death itself, fought with the desperation of those who could finally see rest within their grasp. And through it all, Telos watched as reality itself seemed to tear open, revealing glimpses of things that shouldn't exist, the void architects in their true form, reaching through with appendages made of twisted spacetime, trying to claim the souls they had waited so long to harvest. Now! Marcus shouted as the battle reached its peak. Sarah, initiate the protocol. The glass from Telos's bar shattered, releasing energy that had been waiting centuries to be unleashed. Every Iron Man on the station began to glow with the same light, pure, untainted by the void's corruption. The Foundation's twisted soldiers stopped their attack, their trapped souls responding to the call of the true protocol. It's working, Sarah gasped, her cybernetics overloading from the energy coursing through the Nexus. Every protocol-touched soul in the sector, they're all being drawn here. The Void Architects' vast forms recoiled as their carefully laid plans began to unravel. The corrupted signal that had led the Foundation astray started to fade, overwhelmed by the pure energy of the original protocol. Marcus turned to Telos one last time. Remember what I told you about the most interesting stories? The ones we keep to ourselves, Telos replied, his crystal form glowing with reflected energy. This one's yours now. Make sure they remember why we did this. Make sure they remember what happens when humanity stops fighting itself and faces the real enemy. The Nexus began to fold in on itself, its impossible geometry collapsing into a singularity that would seal the door between realities forever. Sarah's cybernetics were melting, but she kept the station's systems running through sheer force of will. Go, she screamed at Telos. The Iron Rose is ready. Someone has to survive to tell the story. As Telos ran for the ship, he looked back one last time. He saw Marcus standing tall among his fellow Iron Men, their combined souls burning brighter than stars. He saw Sarah, more machine than human, laughing as she directed the energies that would save humanity from its own hubris. He saw Karvex and his warriors standing guard until the very end. The Iron Rose tore free from the dying Nexus just as space itself seemed to implode. The Foundation fleet, the twisted soldiers, the Iron Men, and the Void Architects, all of them were drawn into a singularity that sealed the door between realities forever. In the silence that followed, Telos watched as normal space reasserted itself. Where the Nexus had been, there was nothing but void. But somewhere in that darkness between galaxies, thousands of souls had finally found their rest. Years later, in a rebuilt orbital bar and grill, Telos would sometimes tell the story to those who asked about the dented metal bar mounted behind the counter. He'd tell them about Marcus, about the Iron Men who died so humanity could live. He'd tell them about Sarah's sacrifice, about Karvex's courage, about a battle fought in impossible spaces against enemies from beyond reality itself. But mostly, he'd tell them about hope, about how even in the darkest void between galaxies, the human spirit could shine bright enough to save everything. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the stars seemed a little brighter, he'd raise a glass of ISY and make a toast. To the Iron Men, may they finally rest in the peace they died to protect. The Foundation never returned to the orbital bar and grill. The corrupted protocol was lost forever, its twisted energy sealed away in a place between realities. And if sometimes the void between galaxies seemed a little less dark, a little less empty, well, that was a story Telos kept to himself. After all, the most interesting stories are the ones we keep to ourselves. But sometimes, just sometimes, they're the ones we need to share. End.